You're live. Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
In 3, 2. Welcome, everybody, to the Three Whiskey Happy Hour. We are going to overcome our technological difficulties here, I say, as I see Steve frozen on the screen again.
Again.
You're frozen again.
I'm in my third floor study, which is supposed to have better internet than my office, and it's still freezing up on me. So I don't know what's going on. Anyway.
It's okay.
He just looks like a McRib patty. That's all.
And so John is going to tell us how he's the senior counsel. You want me to start over?
Yeah, why not? Since I just,
you're still
just
frozen.
Ignore me.
So.
I know. Just ignore that.
Your video's chopped.
All right. In 3, 2. Welcome, everybody, to the Three Whiskey Happy Hour. We're joined today, as usual, by my co-hosts, Steve Hayward and John Yu, and I'm, of course, Lucretia. And we are going to hear first from John, who has been appointed chief counsel in the universe for both sides on the new McRib lawsuit, claiming that McDonald's defrauded their customers, whatever the word is, because there are actually no ribs in the McRib. And John?
I have been appointed special prosecutor for McRib discrimination. One of the greatest violations of the natural right to equality in the Constitution is discriminating against lovers of the McRib. First, who thinks anything is genuine in McDonald's? Do you think the quarter pounder is really a quarter pounder of meat? I mean, come on.
There was a lawsuit about that, John. I mean, decades ago, when the quarter pounder first started, and someone weighed and said, it doesn't weigh a quarter pound. This is fraud. And so McDonald's then put in very fine print, 1 quarter pound before cooking.
Yeah.
That was their solution.
Quite frankly, that's how ground beef is sold.
Yeah, well, whatever. It's right?
Yes, if you want real ice cream, you come to Lucretia's house, and she will make it for you with 5 ingredients: egg yolks, cream, milk, vanilla, and honey.
5 ingredients.
5. Don't forget the vanilla. And then you can add ingredients after that, like, chocolate chips or things. But that's because we were looking at the ingredients on ice cream one day, and my son's comment was, why do they have to F this all up with all this crap? And so that's when I started making honey ice cream. It's real. So there you go. Anyway, lovely to see all of you. Thank you for joining us. I'm hoping that that Steve and John's finer freezes will not continue, because, of course, we want to see their facial expressions whenever I make some sort of offensive comment. Steve's already had to dress me down 3 times today for my comments in text messages. So
we'll
see.
Hold on just a minute. There's a footnote on this whole McRib business, and it actually connects to the quarter pounder. So you remember the famous scene in Pulp Fiction where, was it John Travolta asked Samuel L. Jackson? No, Samuel L. Jackson asked, you know what they call the cheeseburger, a quarter pounder in Paris? Because they don't use pounds. And it's cheeseburger royale. Now, the modern meme of this is, what do they call a quarter pounder with cheese in Paris today? And the answer in the meme is something in Arabic, right? Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty funny.
Now you're just pandering. You're pandering to Lucretia.
Oh, of course.
Yeah,
but here's the riddle then, is what do you call the McRib in Paris?
They don't serve it.
They don't serve it. Well, I don't know, right? They probably don't.
God, no. Actually, I do remember being in Germany, ready to move back to the United States, and the movers that came, really nice guys. You're up on a 3rd floor. There's no elevator. They're sending stuff down through a conveyor belt in the windows. And anyway, so we go to get them lunch because they're moving our stuff, and go and get sandwiches at some nice local sandwich place, get a variety of them, all of which had some kind of pork product. And we ended up with literally dozens of sandwiches because they were all Muslim from Turkey and they couldn't eat any of them. So that was problematic. But anyway, yes. My favorite quote for that from John Travolta is not from that movie, Steve. It's from To Paris with Love. And if you haven't seen that movie, it's a wonderful movie. But he did. Really?
It's on my list
God.
after Dodgeball. What
You,
am I
you
going to
didn't
say?
watch Dodgeball either. Oh my God. You guys, I don't know what to do with you. Probably didn't read Good as Gold either, did you?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, enough of that. I suggest everybody out there read Good as Gold, even if these guys are just heathens and Philistines. It's by Joseph Heller, and it's probably the funniest book I've ever read. All right. Off of funny and on to serious. Sorry.
Mm.
I am actually when the protests in Iran first started, I saw them only on X. Only on X. Now you have seen them pop up intermittently on a few places. The New York Post has mentioned them a couple of times. The Spectator had an article today, but the mainstream media has been ignoring it entirely. I have my reasons, I have my explanations for that, but I'm going to ask you guys first of all if you think that the possibility, is there a possibility that the regime will be overthrown by the good Persian people, or is this too much optimism on Lucretia's part? That's my first question for you.
Well, all right, I'll go first. Our late mutual friend Angelo Codavia used to say the Soviet Union ended when it lost the will to kill large numbers of its own people. And I think that's not a bad explanation. It's better than some of the fancy theoretical ones about convergence and all that economic stuff. And I think the same thing is true of Iran. And it's hard to get good news out right now. I see all kinds of different things on Twitter. Some I'm sure is true, some is rumor, reported as fact, and so forth. And so there are big question marks here about what we know and what could happen. Whether you're going to see defections from the military and the police. I do hear stories that the IRGC, is that the Revolutionary Guard, they're out in the streets, killing some people, arresting people, a couple of thousand supposedly. I think there are some good sources of information, but I don't know. So that's the big question. But this is now going on towards almost 2 weeks with growing crowds. And it may be the regime doesn't know quite what to do. I bet they haven't lost their will to kill the number of people necessary to stop it, but it may be that they can't, or that they think that there are risks involved, which there probably are. Lastly, it's not just the
Like
media
Trump?
ignoring this. Well,
Do you think
hold
that's
that
a
for a
risk,
moment.
given what he has said about it? Sorry to interrupt, Steve, but if you're on that subject, do you think
Yeah,
Trump's threat to step in if they actually start killing large numbers of people will have? I believe his
yeah,
threat. He's shown that he's very serious about those things, but will it make a
yeah.
difference to those
Oh, it might.
scum
Oh, I think it
Ayatollahs?
might. I mean, I'm no expert on knowing what the capacities and capabilities are, but I wouldn't mind seeing us drop a big Moab on the IRGC headquarters if we haven't already. I don't know what we or the Israelis did back in June, but look, it's not just the media ignoring it, and I think their excuses are they just don't have good sources and they don't have good visuals. But
No, they're trying, but that's okay.
well, all right. Look, American media can't get in there, and the Europeans. Oh, but look, the Europeans are not saying much. At least Trump is saying something. The Europeans are quiet. There are no protests on American campuses. Where are all the people who care about Gaza, rallying for human rights in Iran? Where are the Hollywood celebrities? Where are you can go on down the list, right? I think we know the reason for that, and it will connect to I think your second subject today, which is.
Mhm.
Well, Iran, yeah, we may not like them, but they're an enemy of the United States, and therefore if you don't actually sympathize with them, you're not going to oppose them.
Right. And before I turn this over to John, the worst take, people tell me it was probably a bot. It's just too good to be true, too awful to be true, I guess you should say, was this would be great if the Ayatollah was overthrown, if the regime was overthrown, if the Persian people were able to get back to some kind of self-governing society, blah, 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 all these things. But this would the fallout for it would be great for Trump and Netanyahu, and I just can't get behind it.
Yeah, there you go. Yep.
John,
Who said that?
it was somebody on Twitter. Some stupid leftist that
Some
is famous,
rando.
whose
I know.
name
Why do
I
you guys? Why do
no,
you guys waste your time on Twitter? I
because
really don't
I wouldn't
understand it.
know about
You
Iran if it
you allow
weren't for
yourself to
Twitter.
be you allow yourself to be buffeted by these loons who drive you nuts, and then they occasionally it does have some good information. But I've been seeing a lot of video on Fox News the last few days about the protests in Iran.
Finally,
Yeah. So one thought is I would like to say yet again, welcome back to the Neo content. I'm so happy that we are threatening to intervene in other countries because we don't like their regime. Now, if you were really a MAGA America firster, why would you care what happens internally in Iran? With mullahs, no mullahs, right? Don't we just want to leave them alone? But we actually do care about the regimes of other countries, and we do care about, right, ensuring freedom and free markets where we can. And so I think it would be great to overthrow the regime in Iran. I hope that the CIA is up to all kind of shenanigans over there. And I agree with Steve. I wouldn't mind to see some more military intervention designed to overthrow the regime if we have the opportunity. And it's amazing, right? We're intervened in Venezuela, Iran twice now.
Okay.
Lucretia's favorite battleground, Nigeria, to defend Christians. Isn't this neoconism, not MAGA America firstism?
That would assume, John, that there is no national security threat to the United States from Iran, and that they have no, shall we call them, influence. They have no influence throughout the world with groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, the Muslim Brotherhood, et cetera, that they aren't, in fact, wreaking havoc and joining with our those enemies that you claim to be worried about, China and Russia. The idea that Iran falls and that the Iranian people, who, by the way, are not anti Israel, Israel is cheering this on. Every Israeli I know, every Israel supporter I know is cheering on this whole protest because it will mean peace and stability in the Middle East. It will shut down the possibility that those terrorists come back and do another 9/11, John. That's not neocon BS.
He's just baiting us,
I know,
Lucretia.
but we have
No,
listeners who might
I
believe
really
him.
think so.
Well, no, wait a minute.
No, I mean, I really think the not the if you were going to be a hardcore realist, you would say we can negotiate with Iran, whoever's in charge. And, that's actually what the Obama people and Biden people said. We're being the realists here. We're reaching an accommodation with it. Look, I don't agree with this, but this is what they said. We're reaching an accommodation with Iran. Why do we care what happens to Israel? If they get attacked by Hamas and Hezbollah, that's not in American national interest. This is not just me. This was like the realist scholars like
There were
that
Americans on
who
October
say,
7th.
American realist scholars say these things, though.
Like who?
I don't agree with them.
Aside from Mearsheimer, who could possibly say something that's
Who
silly?
is a professor at the University of Chicago and one of the biggest realists in the United States? He's not a crank.
Yes, well, okay, I think he is.
If
but never
you
mind.
are deciding your approach to foreign and international affairs by some stupid doctrine that limits your choices to I'm in favor of a regime or I'm not in favor of a regime having anything to do with whether or not we use force, you deserve to be called a stupid crank. I'm sorry. I'm not a neocon. I'm not a realist. I refuse to be put into any of those stupid international relations categories that have been invented for the sole purpose of those people that can't just learn about diplomacy and history. So they have to make up a fake doctrine to go along with their fake international relations discipline. There's my rant.
So, John, I mean, there's a huge difference here, and even the thing that might be an outlier isn't. The outlier is Nigeria, but I'll come back to that. Look, both Iran and Venezuela pose existential security threats to America. We know this. I can't believe you're even saying this is necessarily a neocon thing. That's very much realist self-interest to knock them over. Now, Nigeria looks on the surface like a purely idealistic humanitarian intervention. It's not really even about oil. I mean, Nigeria's oil's going fine. I mean, place is a mess. But I go back to Lucretia's point, which is if you understand Islam, radical Islam, for what threat it poses to Western civilization, then that's the leading edge. And if you're rallying Christian civilization at the same time explicitly as Trump did, then I think that's entirely a realistic, assertive, in the right ways. Oh, the other difference, you notice that we're not trying to do Iraq-style regime change in Venezuela. The mistake of Iraq was we turned it over to the State Department after we overran the country, and that was a
I'm okay
mistake.
with that this time.
What you're okay with not doing that? Is that what
No,
yeah,
I'm
that's
okay
what I'm
with turning
saying.
it over to the State Department because it's Marco
Oh,
Rubio. Sorry,
okay.
Steve.
But no,
And so are you.
yeah, I know. I take your point. But my guess is Rubio's probably saying, "Do not turn it over to us because we'll make a mess of it." Okay,
Yeah.
enough of that.
Sorry. John,
John, nice try, but no one's.
no, but I'm actually interested, John, in you discussing whether or not you think that my very lame attempt to explain the geopolitical ramifications of the end of the Iran regime, the Ayatollahs, the mullahs, whatever, the Islam regime, if you in fact you think that the geopolitical ramifications will benefit the United States, the Middle East, and the world.
So I sorry, I dropped. I think I froze there, so I missed your
I just simple
entire
question. I made it.
comment. No,
I just
I'm not
want to know
asking
if
you
you
to
think.
repeat it though, because I'll just say what it doesn't matter what you asked. I just repeat myself anyway. So
Okay.
no, but here's no. I'm totally joking, but here's what the realists would say. They would say and again, I don't agree with this, but they would say the main enemy is China. And right, there's a guy at the Defense Department, Bridge Colby, who has written a whole book making this argument, and he's now the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. And he would say the Middle East is a distraction and a drain on our resources. We need to pull out of there as fast as possible and reorient everything to China, which means striking a deal with Iran and not using force against them, not getting more heavily involved, not defending Israel, leave Israel to defend itself. And it doesn't we don't need the oil anymore. We are the number one oil producer in the world now. So
Okay, what
why are
would
we
John
wasting any
say?
time?
Don't
Oh
package
well,
it.
John. I mean, that's why I say welcome to the neo content. I'm sorry, I'm like a block from the White House. This is probably
Oh, a
I don't know,
motorcade.
Melania going to the hairdresser or something.
I actually wanted to
Anyway, so no,
know.
I would.
Listen to me, John. I want to know if you think that the geopolitical ramifications of Iran's overthrow will be salutary for the United States and for the world. Never mind what some dumb
See, no,
realist thinks
no.
or
I mean,
neocon.
I think so, but I mean, um, what I would think the America First foreign policy would be in favor of is just stability and the status quo. So yes, we could overthrow Iran, and then it would introduce this destabilization in the Middle East. Maybe it makes things worse. We don't know. It's unpredictable. I bet Carter probably said something stupid at the beginning of the Iranian Revolution, saying, "Oh, this is good that
Oh,
the Iranian people have freed themselves of the Shah," or something ridiculous
oh,
like that. But
I've got all the
I
receipts on
myself
that.
personally, yeah, I personally would be very much in favor of tossing it because I do care about the regime of other countries. I'd rather other countries be democracies if we can help make them so. So I think for a small use of resources, if we could turn Iran into a democracy, and a democracy will be friendly to us, I think in general, then we should do it.
I just offer observation here. Something Lucretia said is really important, that Iranians are not anti-Israeli. We forget now, I mean, this is a long time ago now, but there was a substantial Jewish community in Iran before the
Oh,
Shah was
in
tossed out.
Tehran, yeah.
And Israel and the Shah, they had very good relations. Americans don't. I learned this in college because when I was in college before the Ayatollah Khomeini took over, we had a lot of Iranian students and a lot of Saudi students. And
Mhm.
typical Americans is, oh, they're just all Middle Eastern Arabs, right? Well, guess what? They hated each other. If you told a Saudi, "Are you Iranian?" They'd say, "Oh my God," they'd be horrified if you thought they were Iranian,
No, you
and
would have
vice
said, "Are you
versa, right?
Persian?"
Well, no, that was a funny story. That became a matter of some controversy
Mhm.
when my school newspaper used the word Persian instead of Iranian. So leave that aside for now. But some did, some didn't. But the point is that there's a lot that they do not have in common over there. I think it's going to be more like Egypt, where it looked like the Muslim Brotherhood was going to take over, and so we backed the military guys to stabilize it, and now we get along fine with them. It's not a good democracy, but nonetheless, it's certainly better for our national interests. Okay.
Okay. I, on the other hand, pray every day for the Persian people.
Yeah, there you go.
And the women, but, I'm no feminist, as you know, but the idea that, and maybe it's just what the algorithm feeds me on X, but I get a lot of, posts about women and, taking off their hijab and dancing and I get that stuff all the time, and a lot of the posts are written in terms of this is a victory for women who enjoyed an incredible amount of Western freedom prior to the Islamic Revolution. And you see the pictures, the difference between what was going on in the early 70s versus today. It's horrifying from a female point of view. I'll be honest with you, it's horrifying to me. But it's one of the reasons why I find Islam horrifying, simply speaking. But I do want to ask Steve, because Steve, often you would make the comment, and I know you'll remember this, even though you never remember anything. The You'll remember that you say this often in context, and that is that there is a flight from Tehran, a daily flight from Tehran to Venezuela every single day.
I think it's like 3 times a week, not every day,
Okay.
but the point is it happens, right? And who's on those? Yes. Sorry, what's your question? Or
My question is, do you think that the two things will have okay, my geopolitical ramifications question. If both Venezuela and if Venezuela stays fallen, shall we say, and the democracy takes over, I know there's some, that it's a critical time. Things are very, very, up in the air. But if Venezuela becomes more democratic and the Iranian regime falls, that connection, you obviously thought that connection was important. Do you see the two things making a difference?
oh well, yes, and here's why: because it means that Bridge Colby's vision that John was mentioning now takes the fore. I think one of the important things about the Venezuela operation last week, as I understand it, is we neutralized their Chinese and Russian supplied radars and air defense systems quite easily. I think we did so in Iran back in June, also along with the Israelis. That's going to give pause to China and Russia, I think, because if you're China contemplating invading Taiwan, and you've just seen that our technology can overcome their missile defenses and radars easily, then you start worrying about whether or not they're quite vulnerable in the case of an attack, depending on whether we decide to intervene. Okay. I saw somebody speculate, if you want to think about what ought to be on the mind of China right now, it should be thermobaric bombs and the Three Gorges Dam. And that's something that maybe Taiwan could take out if they wanted to, if they have our technology. Anyway, that's just some rambling thoughts, but it changes the whole global map, it seems to me.
Okay, and I want to ask John a question about his recent article about international law. But before we go there, I want to ask Steve if he thinks that the entire Trump foreign policy in this second term is a manifestation of Reagan's the open mic, hot mic moment. The bombing will start in 5 minutes.
Well, of course, that was meant to be a joke, and people took it seriously. Like, I remember the TV
Maybe.
news anchors were like, "Oh my God, can you believe Reagan said that? How horrible!" Well, all right. I mean,
The Soviets took it seriously.
well, look, it's not just that. I was talking to somebody this morning about how, remember that Reagan changed everything instantly his first year when he said to the Navy, "You shoot down any Libyan planes that harass you," and we did. And people said, "Oh, we don't mess with this guy." Now Trump is that same thing on steroids. And one of the things I like about Trump is, the planes aren't even back yet from Venezuela, and Trump is saying, "Oh yeah, by the way, Greenland's next. Yeah, we might invade." Now, crazy idea, but the point is, he keeps the whole world off balance constantly. He's always 2 steps ahead. He has everybody freaking out. Now, some of this may be nuts, but on the other hand, guess who's got the initiative right now in world affairs? Well, he does, and I think that's fine. That's why I don't really get too worked up about the whole Greenland scene. I just kind of like that it's happening.
So John wrote a
Steve,
great piece.
you're just a chaos agent. Like, you don't want things to be chaotic between us and our allies. You want it to be chaotic on our
Who
enemies
says?
and
Our
rivals.
our allies need shaking up badly, and this kind of thing is doing it. I think doing it well and getting some productive results. They're all spending more on defense, and okay. Anyway.
Okay, but that's leading to lots of criticisms of Trump, including the criticism that he is violating international law. So John had a great piece, although I will preempt the whole thing by saying it failed in the end by not calling for our complete withdrawal from the UN and kicking them the hell out of Manhattan. Go ahead, John. Tell us what you think about
Oh, well, we could
international
do
law.
that. That wouldn't be a bad idea. That's the first time I've ever heard someone make international law sound sexy, though. That was interesting. We should take that and we should sell that audio clip to the UN. They could use it on their voicemail message. So, one thing, so I did start with the premise that there is international law and that nations should follow it. So I guess I could write another piece questioning those
Obligatory,
precepts.
gratuitous.
Yeah. But if you accept that so I argued that international law is not this sort of static concept like a written statute that's like our domestic law, but that it's norms that govern countries, and countries can change them over time. And that one of the things that we are doing is that we're trying to say international law prohibits the use of force against other countries, but the point of it was to stop aggression of the kind we saw in World War II by Germany and Japan. And I said, what it should allow us to do, first of all, I think, is to use force maybe in situations like a country using drugs and gangs to try to undermine us and destabilize us, which is what the Trump administration is saying in Venezuela. Is it possible? Do you have to wait till you see an invasion by an armed force about to occur across your border before you can use force? I would say no. And I argued that the United States has never held itself to that kind of standard. And then the second thing I argued, and I think this might not be what Lucretia likes, is, and what's wrong with saying that we're allowed to intervene in Venezuela because it's being oppressed by foreign countries who are looting it, and there was a democratic election, and those people who won invited us into the country to get rid of these looters who are oppressing the population. But then that's a neocon idea, I think, to say, well, we had a democratic election and we have an interest in using force to put the people who won the democratic election in power and kicking out these dictators who are looting the country on behalf of our enemies. That's
Can
what
I
I
just
argued.
really quickly point out, it made a lot of news for the last day or so that some recent poll, so I don't have it in front of me, has evidence. It indicates that MAGA is strongly behind Trump's efforts in Venezuela, in part because they don't believe that we're going to go there and do nation building. We'll help out. We'll make sure that things remain stable enough for the Venezuelan people and the democratically elected leaders and their allies there to get some stability. But there's not going to be boots on the ground and nation building and IEDs blowing up our soldiers on Venezuelan roads and all those things that caused MAGA to despise the Bushes, despise our efforts in Afghanistan and Iraq, and so MAGA's all in favor of it. MAGA likes the fact that Trump is, how did you put it, on steroids these days. So anyway, I just don't know. I think that the problem with putting this stuff in terms of neocon and realist, those are outdated concepts. Maybe they mattered, but they don't anymore. They don't.
John's just trying to be a troublemaker as usual. Because actually, it's even better than that, Lucretia. I think. So John, you used sort of neoconish idealistic terms. One of the things I love about this episode is Trump is saying, "Hey, we're going to take their oil and we're going to sell it, and we're going to keep the money and maybe build up their oil industry." And what's fun about this is first, this is if ever there was a war where oil was really the primary factor, it would not be this one. As you pointed out, we're now the number one oil producer in the world. I get it about that oil's heavy oil that's well suited to our Gulf Coast refiners, but Trump says this openly, and so the left is suddenly sputtering, saying, "Wait a minute, that's our line, right? You've just stolen our line by saying we're going to keep the oil." But but step one, go take it one more step. I watched the Democrats say Trump's just going to steal their oil, and I want to raise my hand and say, well, wait a minute. Didn't Venezuela expropriate the investments of many American oil companies when they took power 20 years ago? The answer is yes. Seems to me we have a legitimate claim, and you could, you don't want to go all around the world bailing out companies who've had their assets seized by corrupt governments. But here's a case where you'd be completely justified in knocking them over to say, you know what, we're getting our property back because you committed unjust acts against Americans and American property. So
You know what Trump did
that,
today, Steve?
No, I can't keep up.
He brought in all the major heads of
right.
the major oil companies and convinced them to invest $100 billion in Venezuela to rebuild their oil industry infrastructure.
Well, right, and we'll see. I assume that will happen. Look, I follow the oil industry, as you know. However, the point is, between Venezuela and Guyana next door, and let's not forget that Venezuela was menacing Guyana within the last 18 months, which is a factor to keep in mind. You now have the United States and that part of the world that now dominate the world oil market, and the OPEC cartel, which has always been fragile, it would be out of business for good. Another blow for Western interests. John, you're not impressed. You're looking all sour.
No, I'm not getting sour. I'm just waiting for Lucretia to hammer me again.
No, I'm not going to hammer you. You're trying to hammer me because I know
she's going to hammer me with. She's going to hammer me with international law.
Johnny's all breathless.
All right.
Jeepers.
Well, speaking of,
do you got to put a PG rating on this? Never mind. I'm sorry.
I can't actually. The funniest thing happened to be what we've been talking a lot, and I hope we get to Steve's article about Texas A&M. But when I was in college, the funniest thing that happened to me the entire time I was in college was I was asked to take a class in I swear this is the name of the course, Principles of Marketing. The Principles of Marketing. Oh God. Anyway, but it gets better. I was a poster child for the lack of standards back at least in the marketing department at my college. I was given an A in the class because my voice was considered so sexy, and the class produced a commercial for a made-up company, and that was all part of the whole marketing, hands-on kind of thing. And my voice was used in the commercial because it was considered by everyone the sexiest voice out there. And I got an A for doing nothing but reading the lines of the commercial.
So maybe you should be hired by the left to do commercials for them, like income redistribution. And other kinds of left-wing phrases that you suddenly make sound so good.
Oh, thanks, John. Thanks, John. Okay, on that happy note, let's move on to. Do we need to have a break, Steve?
No.
Okay, no, good. Because I wasn't ready for one. I do want to talk because it's been, even though nothing has shown up in most of the media I read about Iran, or very little, it's constant about Minneapolis. And I wanted to start by I just happened this morning. I got on the elliptical machine, and I was looking for something to listen to, and I ended up on our August 29th episode watching it, and wherein we discussed it. It happened just right after the Annunciation shooting. And that's when I first became aware of the idiot mayor. I have my own nickname for him. I'm taking on after Trump, Mayor Fried Brain of Minneapolis.
That's good.
Who, and I'm going to read the quote, because if you remember, what happened was a transgender, I can't even remember. He was a man pretending to be a woman, whichever it was. I can't even remember anymore. Went into a place he had gone to school and staked it out and did all of these things, and then went in and killed 2 children and injured 17 more. And Fried Brain, had 2 comments. The first was, anybody who is using this as an opportunity to villainize our trans community or any other community out there has lost their sense of common humanity. That was his one comment. And his other comment was, don't just say this is about thoughts and prayers right now. These kids were literally praying. And we talked about that at some length. Steve gave a really nice discussion, actually, about how this was emblematic of the left's hostility to religion and so on. One thing I wanted to point out is that one of the little girls was shot in the head. One of the survivors, and people were certain that she was going to die, and if she didn't die, she was going to be severely handicapped and so on. 57 days in the hospital, she went home, and there's video of her getting out of the limo that brought her home to a cheering crowd, walking. Those thoughts and prayers made a difference. I just have to get that out there. There's my little sermon for today. However, that being said, the guy is just unbelievable. He's so unbelievably vile. I don't have words. So there was a shooting in Minneapolis. How many days ago? 3 days ago, I guess it's been something like that. 2 days ago. And it occurred because a woman, egged on, I guess, by her wife. Every time I see that, that just sort of makes me cringe. You got to have a different word for it. I'm sorry. But anyway, part of anti-ICE that they got involved in because they go to some woke charter school, or their kid goes to some woke charter school, and they're out there every day protesting against ICE. She blocks the road with her Honda Civic or Honda SUV.
Pilot. Yeah.
Pilot. Yeah, whatever. And they ask her to get out, the dash cam, the body cam from the officer who shot her, the ICE officer who shot her, came out today. It's clear he acted in self-defense. It's clear that she was a radical protester, all of those things. But of course, that idiot fried brain got out there right away and said, this wasn't self-defense, that's BS. He didn't use the initials. Just said all sorts of really horrible things that between him and Waltz have led to, what now, 3 days of protests? Has it been?
Yeah.
Anyway, I want to
Tuesday.
stop talking about it and hear what you guys have to say, what you think about what this means for the division in our society. Are we going to have a civil war now?
Well, I mean, what did Walt say? He was calling out the National Guard, and I wasn't sure, and maybe, John, you can sort me out here. I wasn't sure if that was trying to preempt the possibility of the president requisitioning the National Guard. But if he actually is trying to call out the National Guard and giving them orders to interpose themselves between the people that ICE is trying to apprehend and the police and the National Guard's in the middle of them, that is actually inviting a civil war. I mean, that's and let us remember, 2 or 3 years ago, we were arguing again with John because we said, shouldn't states like Texas and Arizona, if the federal government's not doing their job, police the border some? And the Supreme Court, John's right about this, said no, it's a federal responsibility solely. Well, guess what? Shoes on the other foot now. It is the federal responsibility to police the immigration domain. And now they're saying they're going to send out their National Guard to interpose themselves in that task. That's, that you might as well, it's the firing on Fort Sumter, right? I do think, I was curious too about the fact that this woman who the media is describing as someone who has 3 children and liked to write poetry and sing songs, because of course, St. George Floyd, as we know, but she was married twice to men, one of whom died at the age of 36, which just sounds either tragic or strange. I don't know. I don't think we know everything yet. I sort of skip over the usual letters of her identity in favor of another acronym that I've sort of picked up on lately, but it's just from the video you've seen, and you've now seen her speaking a little bit to those officers in a completely contemptuous and smug way. And the acronym is AWFL, AWFL, which I gather stands for Angry White Female Leftist. And
it actually stands for affluent, and I don't think she is. But you can repurpose it as angry if you like.
Yeah, well, the other
Yeah.
thing too is I don't think she's a local. I mean, this is
Oh,
I'm
they
unclear on this,
moved to
but
Minnesota a year ago to experience Minnesota after
is
they had
that it?
moved to
Okay,
Canada because they were because of Trump getting elected, so they moved to
right.
Canada, and then
Okay.
they moved
Well,
back to Minnesota.
but the main point I
Or
want to
is that
get
from
to
them?
about this is, we do have a failure of local police, like Minneapolis and everywhere else, to do anything serious about protest culture. And by protest culture, I mean the people have been blocking roads, laying down on roads, and blocking airports on behalf of climate change. And sometimes they will detain people, although always slowly, and they let them off. They never charge them with anything. And so, why shouldn't people who now, and there's organized efforts behind this, right? Why shouldn't people think that, gosh, we can get away with blocking roads for climate change? Why can't we do the same thing with ICE? So, look, I think a lot of blame for a circumstance like this getting to this extreme point belongs with local governments, starting with the government in Minneapolis. Then finally, let's then really throw it out there, which is the left exploits any issue. You know, the old story, the issue is not the issue is the revolution. And if you go back to the Chicago Convention in 1968, it was an object of the organizers of the anti-war protest there to provoke the police into violence. They wanted violence from the police.
Mhm.
And by the way, public opinion polls showed that the public overwhelmingly was on the side of the police. As 2 years later, a majority of the public backed the young National Guardsmen at Kent State who were probably undertrained, who in a moment of panic fired and killed 4 students, right? Terrible moment, awful moment. But the public said, wait a minute, we are not going to, as pointing out to somebody else earlier this morning, that, yeah, the Vietnam War was unpopular, but what was more unpopular? The anti-war protesters were hugely unpopular, and they didn't figure that out. Well, the left today, I think, is playing the same cynical game. They want martyrs. They're going to want more, and now they have one. And it's another reason to really despise these people.
I wanna respond, but I wanna hear from John first. Do you wanna move
Well,
to
I
Minneapolis,
was
John? Experience it?
I actually have a good friend who lived not far from there who moved from Minneapolis, quit his job and moved from Minneapolis to Utah because he'd had it after all the George Floyd protests, which he said just destroyed downtown Minneapolis and was a constant threat. But I was on the Fox Outnumbered show while this was happening. Like in the middle of the show, they started showing this video from Minneapolis, and after having seen all these different other videos, I'm still not sure exactly what happened. It's still, up in the air, and we need to have an investigation and find out whether the woman in the car was headed for the officer, or some people say the car's turning away. Whether it's a justified use of force or not. I think we really need to have more information before we can really definitively know. And there's a lot of interesting legal issues. I mean, Minnesota, I guess some officials are talking about trying to prosecute the officer for murder. Um, but I can say that this would really only happen in a blue state, because in a normal state, the state police should be there to prevent this from happening to the ICE officers in the first place. And it's only because you have state officials in a place like Minnesota either encouraging interference. If it really does go as far as the governor activating the National Guard to prevent federal officers from doing their duty under valid federal law, that's exactly the same thing that the segregationist governors did in the South, right? The
And can the
governor of
president,
Arkansas, right?
federalize them under those circumstances, John?
Well, this is a big problem because the Supreme Court just a few weeks ago, right, recall they said that the president can't federalize the National Guard in these circumstances unless he tries and fails with the regular forces, quote unquote, regular forces, uh, to enforce federal law. Everyone thought that used to mean the FBI, ICE, civilian law enforcement. The Supreme Court, for some reason, thinks this means the regular armed forces of the United States. So this creates this bizarre possibility where, and actually, what Eisenhower did in this situation is he first sent the 101st Airborne, and he federalized the Guard units so that he took them away from Arkansas control. But it sounds like, according to the Supreme Court, President Trump has to send the 101st Airborne first and try to enforce federal law. And only if they fail can he federalize the National Guard. That makes no sense to me, but that's essentially what you have to do under the Supreme Court opinion now. So
Right.
I think it's the reason this has happened, whether the agent is at fault or not, this only arose because the state is making it obvious to people that they're not going to defend federal officers from attackers, as is the job of the state police and local police, and that they're actually going to try to prosecute and interfere with ICE and other federal agents.
I take this,
They're
first of all,
responsible for
very
the tragedy.
personally, because I have a good friend who's HSI, who has actually been deployed, I guess is the right word there, to Minneapolis a few days ago, right before all of this happened, when they said they were sending in the 2,000 agents. But a couple of comments. One is that there's a poll, very faulty, I don't remember where it came from, but that claims that Americans are very much opposed by large numbers to the Trump administration deportation, massive, cruel, and reaching too far deportation. I think that's a load of you know what. I think that Americans actually support this, including Hispanics. Now, of course, that's anecdotal on my part. It's who I've talked to. I've yet to talk to anybody who opposes the idea that if someone's here illegally, they should not be deported. It doesn't matter if they have families, if they've been here for years, that tends to make people say even more reason to get rid of them. They have violated our laws for too long, despite the fact that we let them. I get it. However, I want to go back to what Steve was saying about it's not the issue, it's the revolution. That particular poll is being used to gaslight Americans and especially gaslight those vulnerable, not very bright Minnesota awfuls, shall we say, to believe that somehow there's massive support or fried brain to believe that there's massive support for their resistance to deporting illegal aliens. I got very upset when I saw the New York Post this morning refer to them as undocumented migrants. They are not. They are illegal aliens. That is the correct legal term. Here's my point. That those kinds of, forgive me, narratives are used in really insidious ways. And we see the evidence of that in places like Minneapolis. One last quick anecdote. Driving to lunch yesterday in my one dinky little town, there are 4 awfuls marching down the main highway with signs, one of which has that ugly no lookism about the dead, Lucretia, but has a sign with her picture on it and all of this anti-ICE stuff. So of course I roll down my window and say, "We support ICE," and honk, and then keep driving. Of course, I do that. Not that it mattered, but anyway, I'm actually very concerned because unless back to that poll for just a moment, I'm going to change, not because it's John, but I'm going to change the definition of OG from original gangsta to obligatory and gratuitous. That is my new phrase. Even our friends on the right, I won't say his name because right now things are a little tough for him, but wrote an article about Trump the other day and included right at the beginning that he's carrying out this supposed, at least libertarian, this awful, cruel deportation program, obligatory and gratuitous slams on Trump, making everybody think that somehow this is the wrong thing to do. It is absolutely the right thing to do. And if you don't believe it's the right thing to do, stop taxing the American people, or American people, let's stop paying taxes.
No, look, this is regime propaganda has brought us to this point. There were several polls about a year ago, I guess, or maybe a little less than that, last summer, that showed strong majorities of Americans favoring the deportation of all illegal immigrants, not just the criminals. Well, why is that number flipped? Well, the media has been relentless in cherry picking stories and picking, as they always have for decades, whatever the particular angle was, whether it was Reagan's welfare cuts, supposedly in the 80s and so forth. And so now you get this poll result. And I think in both cases, you can say that public opinion is too much of it is malleable to this kind of regime propaganda. I'll call it that way because I think that works pretty well.
Okay. I want to get to one. I want to ask John a couple of legal questions. I think people are going to be interested in them. The first one is whether he believes, I'm sure you've heard that Trump has suspended social welfare, social spending payments, federal payments to 5 states who are credibly accused of massive levels of fraud in the administration of those social welfare programs. And those 5 states, of course, have sued. And of course, there's some judge that's going to come and say, yeah, he can't do that. Is something like that within the president's Article 2 legitimate executive spending powers to suspend payments with evidence of massive fraud?
Yeah, this actually is interesting. It raises the whole debate about impoundment that we talked about almost a year ago now. It's always been thought that the president has some kind of implicit authority not to waste money. That, for example, the president doesn't have to keep putting money into an account from which, say, someone has hacked the account as just stealing the money, right? It's stealing it from the state. So there's always been this idea that, yeah, presidents have, unless Congress were to direct him to waste the money, that there's this implied idea that in carrying out a spending law, you do it in a way that doesn't, incur fraud, waste, and abuse. And so I think it's well within the president's power to pause the funding and say, we're not going to send it to Minnesota anymore until we're sure that you've done an audit and the money's not going to fake people or fake organizations that are not truly receiving it under the terms that Congress set out in statute. So I think, unless Congress passed a law saying we direct you to put money in this account, even if you don't know who's receiving it, and even if it's being spent for reasons that are not included in the congressional statute, right? The president could say, look, Congress created this account for this purpose, say autistic education. I'm sorry, that sounds like education for autistic people.
Not if you've been in a university
Actually,
lately,
that sounds like
right.
what that's what it sounds like what we're doing at Berkeley. Yeah, no, and so if you say then the president could say, well, after seeing these reports, I'm not sure the money's actually getting to the recipients that Congress has defined by statute. And so I'm going to pause it because this state, these are all, by the way, people should realize joint federal state programs where I've never thought these were a great idea, but the federal government really relies on the states to run the programs and they just basically give the money and states match. Often the federal government is giving a lot more. Well, that's one of the problems of COVID funding programs is basically the federal government gave 90% of the funds and the state only chips in 10%. So a place like Minnesota figured out, why should we audit these programs at all? The federal government's just going to keep shoveling money to us. So yeah, I think under the take care clause, the president can pause the funding because he has to be sure the money's going to where Congress wants it to go.
I'm going to take that one to the bank and hope that some judge listens to you, but I'm not necessarily very optimistic about that. I will also say that there are several people, at least in Congress, if they could get away with passing a law that said exactly what you said there, they would do it. Thinking of the fiasco that was the committee on the Congressional Committee on Fraud in Minneapolis or Minnesota the other day. Anyway, one more important legal question for you, John, because I know you have to go. And that is, are you familiar with the argument from the Supreme Court case in Schneiderman? Let me make sure I get it right. Schneiderman versus the United States is a 1943 case where this guy comes from the Soviet Union. moves to Minnesota, of all places, and then runs for governor as a communist, as an avowed Soviet communist. And the federal government tries to have him, he becomes a citizen, and the federal government tries to have him denaturalized. And because, he doesn't, because he lied on his citizenship application, or because the naturalization committee that reviewed it failed to realize that he does not adhere to the principles of the Constitution. Case went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court appeared to agree that in fact not adhering to the principles of the Constitution, as you are required to take an oath to do, could be a reason to denaturalize and end the citizenship, revoke the citizenship of someone, but that the burden of proof was on the government, and that the government had to prove this beyond any kind of reasonable doubt. So could that be used against Mandami Wami Sami, whatever his name is, in New York?
Yeah. Oh, interesting. So, under the Constitution, the Congress sets out, has the power of naturalization. So it's up to Congress to decide, right, the conditions on which people would be given citizenship. And so if someone, I think the holding of the case actually makes sense. If someone lies on the form about, the naturalization, then of course you could say you lied on the form, you're denaturalized. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think the problem is how would and I believe the act says you have to support the Constitution. You can't be, now that's different than natural born Americans who can be born,
Right.
and you can't denaturalize them even if they actively campaign against the Constitution. So I think the problem in that case, and actually it would bear on a case about Mandani, is that he was accused of being a communist. It's not clear being a communist is anti-constitutional, right? Does the Constitution actually say if you're a communist, you are, right, by definition,
That was the court
not supporting the Constitution?
determination.
Yeah. So Mandani is going to say, I'm a democratic socialist, but that's not barred by the Constitution. I can believe in, right? I don't, what's it called? The warm embrace of collectivism, right? And he would say, where does the Constitution say
the confiscation of property?
Communist.
Well,
but he would have to, I guess, lose a case that would say what he wants, that what he's doing actually is a taking.
Well,
and then he's not paying just comp. Notice the Constitution doesn't forbid taking property. It says you can't take property unless you pay for it.
Right. Yeah. So, John, you may have to go. I know
so I think it's hard.
Yeah.
It is hard. I just want to, I thought it was a really interesting idea, and became, I'm sorry, Steve, because I do want your commentary on it. More interesting after, what's her name? Sia Weaver? Is that
Weaver, yeah,
name right?
right.
Yeah. What a perfect sort of, the quintessential leftist twit. A redheaded, pale, cryy, whiny lefty, grew up in splendor and upper middle class, went to Bryn Mawr, for God's sakes, and now she wants to take away all white people's property. And then when she's when she is posed with the question, well, do you want to take away your mom or your dad's $1 million homes? They're white. And she cries and runs away.
Yeah.
Is that not perfect?
Then
Doggy Wami's standing by her.
Great.
Right.
It is great.
Well, so, I'm going to go back and find this and write up an item for it, because I can only remember this vaguely. G.K. Chesterton came to America, about 100 years ago, and he wrote about my visit to America. And one of the things he found charming, but also ironic, was the immigration form he had to fill out. And it said something like, question, are you entering the country for subversive purposes? And he said, who would answer that honestly if they were? I mean, it's sort of, only a bureaucrat could think of. We still have those questions on the current immigration form. Until just a few years ago, one of the questions was, have you ever been associated with the Nazi Party of Germany? And that could disqualify you. They still ask you, have you ever committed genocide? So they ask a bunch of these questions, and then at the end of the form, this part I do remember, which is still in existence. You can find it if you go down the State Department website. It says a yes answer to any of these questions does not automatically disqualify you from getting a visa to come to America. By the way, it's not even natural, just getting a visa. It says, but a yes answer may require you to make an appointment with a consular official. That's our immigration enforcement, right? I mean, it's a joke. It's just ridiculous. But it seems to me, if barring someone from getting a visa, let alone citizenship, or having been a Nazi, I think we can work in being a communist too.
Yeah, I saw an article, but I thought it was an interesting concept. And if there was ever a time when the federal government, the administration in charge of the federal government would be likely to do something like that, it's now, I think. They're riding high. I can see Marco taking on that job too. So unfortunately, folks, John has to be somewhere. He probably had to be there an hour ago, but he decided to grace us with his presence, for which we will be eternally grateful, even though we're not outnumbered with 4 women in high heels. John, I can't tell you how many times
If they
people
could
come up
just
to me.
if they could just match your voice with them, it would be perfect.
Yeah. How many people tell me, I saw John Yuan outnumbered now? People walk up to me all the time. Anyway, let's do some Babylon Bees. And John, if you have to go, we'll see you next week. Somali's
I'm sitting
demand.
through all this.
Okay, good. We're glad to have you. Somali's demand Americans stop judging them by the content of their character. ICE agents. This one's for you, John. ICE agents disguise themselves as Capitol Police so Democrats will defend them. And
that's pretty good.
I thought you'd like it. Democrats say things would be much safer if law enforcement would just stop trying to enforce the law. That's not funny.
Yeah, it's true.
That's
right?
just not funny.
Yeah.
That's exactly what they're saying. Democrats warn of chilling effect voter ID will have on rigged elections. Right? Oh, God. Tucker Carlson, we don't usually bother, but we're not going to discuss Tucker Carlson or Candace Owens on this podcast anymore. I don't want to give them the notoriety, but I will bring up the Babylon Bees. Tucker Carlson dumbfounded why Iranians protesting most amazing government on planet. Tim Waltz calls in Somali military to fight against ICE. And Democrats demand to know why ICE agents can't just shoot cars in the leg.
Oh, right. Oh, yes. Oh,
I know.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
By the way, John, you do need to. I appreciate, because I said the same thing until I saw the body cam, and it's pretty compelling. So the White House just released it this afternoon. If you get a chance to watch it, I know you've been busy. The body cam off of
I
the
haven't
officer
seen it.
is pretty compelling. I'm not an expert at those things. Last thing. Exhausted nation wishes Minnesota would be normal for like 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. All right.
John?
Well, always drink your whiskey neat, buy more books. And Steve, what has the AI mastermind told you to do now?
I didn't have time to do a new one today because I've been working on that law review article we're doing on the Euclid case. But I'll just end with this observation. I was late coming to the awful acronym, the angry, affluent white female leftist. But there's another couple that's going around that now I like. I ignored it for a long time, but you hear the people say that the left these days can be characterized by 3 things: gay, race, communism. And I look at New York and Mondami, and that's really right. So gay race communism, that's the perfect. I should laugh, I guess.
That's almost as good
right?
as obligatory and gratuitous.
Yeah, there you go. But that's it. So, all right.
Almost.
Thanks, everybody. We had over 110 people come in. Gene Yarber was along.
Great.
Hi.
Gene, D, our friend
Right.
D
Sorry,
was
I
on
gotta
there,
run.
John.
Yeah, but if I had the ability, I would have had Gene on the broadcast to talk about that Texas A&M story, but we don't. But maybe next time. So, anyway,
Okay. Yeah.
okay,
Next time. All right. Good to
right,
see you, Steve.
all right,
Bye, everyone.
bye.
Have a wonderful week.
And then I got to figure out how to turn this thing off. And that's how you do it. You press the end button. And see you later.